Welcome to our program on Kardec Radio.
Hello, and welcome to the Explore Spiritism program on Kardec Radio. In this program, I share teachings, resources, and reflections to help you along your way as you explore Spiritism. In our last episode, I presented the concept of the Gospel at Home meeting. If you watched, you may recall that I started out saying that I had originally intended that night to share a reading that my husband and I had selected completely at random during a recent Gospel at Home meeting of ours. But I instead decided to use that episode to explain what the Gospel at Home is all about for those who may have never heard of it, may be a little unfamiliar with it. Now, if that's you, you didn't get to watch the last episode, the Gospel at Home is just a reserved time each week that Spiritists like to set aside to get together as the members of a family or a household, and then as a group, read, reflect on, discuss a morally edifying reading. I'm going to put the link to that video from that episode in the comments to this week's episode on Facebook so that you can go and check out all the details. But as promised, I want to talk to you tonight about the reading that we had as part of our Gospel at Home. So on that day, there was a storm that was approaching and had the potential to impact our area the very next day as a hurricane. So we had, been that day moving in all our patio furniture. We had been moving all that around. We went out and we got our gas. We got water, we got a little food, picked up some cash, doing all the things that we need to do to get ready. And then we came home and we sat down for our Gospel at Home meeting. And we use currently the book, Our Daily Bread, and we're opening it at random. So the chapter that we landed on at random was called, and I'm going to show you here, Make Preparations, right? So of course, we looked at the chapter title and then we looked at each other like, seriously? But it didn't really surprise us, but it kind of gets us every time because it's just not terribly uncommon for the chapter title that we open to have everything to do with whatever is going on in our lives that day or at that time, or that maybe we kind of prayed about, asked for advice on during our opening prayer to the meeting. And it's sort of humorous, it's sort of a special feeling because it's like you feel the presence, right, of the spiritual benefactors, and it's like them saying, look, we see you guys, we hear you, we know what's going on, and here's our advice to you tonight. So I wanted to bring this text to you. I'm actually going to read it to you, and then I'm going to share my comments, okay? Now, the spirit author, Emmanuel, through the medium Chico Xavier, he opens every chapter with a gospel verse. This particular chapter opened with something from Luke, where Jesus said, "Then he will show you a large furnished upper room. Make preparations there." And then using that as his backdrop, Emmanuel went on to write, "The furnished upper room to which Jesus was referring is a perfect symbol of the internal dwelling of the soul. In looking at nature, which offers priceless lessons in every area of activity, we can see that people wait for each new day to renew activity in their home. Here they sweep up the dirt. There they decorate the walls. The furniture, almost always the same, goes through the daily cleaning process. If this is the case with the material aspect of earthly life, what may be said about the spiritual efforts for the eternal path? Of course, countless people go through each day unconsciously, almost mechanically. They get out of bed, feed the perishable body, spend all their time on trifles, and then go to sleep each night. Sincere disciples, however, know that they have reached the symbolic upper room of the heart. Although they cannot change their ideas every day, just like the furniture in their home, they give them a new shine at every moment by sublimating their impulses, renewing their concepts, elevating their desires, and continually improving the laudable qualities they already possess. Merely earthly-minded people keep themselves in the expectation of an organic death. Spiritual people await the divine master in order to consolidate their redemption. Therefore, do not abandon the upper room of faith, and within it, make continuous preparations. So, this is already a great analogy, first of all. You know, taking care of our home environment is a never-ending activity, right? We all know that. Sometimes it feels like the no sooner you get done dusting, mopping, sweeping, whatever it may be, that dust and dirt finds its way back in, right? Sometimes you bring it in. Oftentimes it's the people that you share the space with, or the people that you let in, that also add to the dirt, to the general wear and tear. And when you can't or don't, for whatever reason, get to it right away, then eventually what happens? At minimum, the sight of it at some point starts to bother you, distracts you, feels kind of uncomfortable. And eventually, right, if you don't take care of it, it can potentially impact your health. Well, the same thing happens when it comes to our mental environment, our mental, emotional, and spiritual health and well-being. The point is that it takes a constant activity, a constant TLC, right? We got to give ourselves that tender, loving care and a sort of maintenance to keep our mental space, right? Our psychosphere, our energetic being in a state of balance, and keep that mental space a comfortable and healthy place to be. Life puts a lot of wear and tear on us, mentally and emotionally. And as children of God, we deserve to take the time to take care of ourselves, to show ourselves some love and keep ourselves in balance. This is why it's important to do things that help us relax from those everyday stresses. Do things that actually nourish even our physical health. And, you know, do activities and spend some time in things that give us joy, that bring us peace, that lift us up, inspire and encourage us, things that connect us to God, and that help us to grow spiritually speaking. Sometimes, we keep putting these things in last place, or we feel like they're not a priority, but they're not at all selfish, they're not superfluous, and they are important. In fact, they're necessary. Now, going back to our homes, sometimes we feel the need to renew the environment in our home. Emmanuel talked about the decor that we put on our wall, right? And at times we get bored. We want to kind of change things up around the house. Have you ever done that and noticed how even the smallest of changes can make a big difference? You change something and then you find it to be kind of energizing. You feel different in that renewed space. Well, again, the same thing happens for us mentally and spiritually speaking. Routine is good. In fact, we need some sort of routine to keep a certain level of stability. But some of us take things a little too far in routine, right? I myself, I tend to be a creature of habit. So I know from experience that too much routine is also not good, right? Too much habit can kind of get us into a little bit of a rut. And when we get in that place, we start to feel bored. We start to feel unmotivated. Sometimes we don't even know right away what it is until something or someone inspires us to go and change things up a bit. And then we realize, gosh, I really needed that. Because our spirits need the chance to try new activities, to see different places, meet new people, learn new things, right? It really does impact our health and well-being in the short and the long term. Now, speaking of the long term, in this message from Emmanuel, the author takes this need for our spiritual nourishment and care beyond the day-to-day. He takes the importance for our well-being even beyond this incarnation. And this is because the efforts to take care of our spiritual and moral life play out well after we take our last breath in the physical body that we're now living in. And Emmanuel talks about us as spiritual people awaiting the divine master in order to consolidate our redemption. When he uses those words, he's not referring to a concept like Jesus or waiting on Jesus to erase the consequences of our poor choices or sometimes our careless behaviors. It's not what this is about. This is an understanding at the moment from what we study and reflect on. It's an understanding of our role in our own experience here in this life and our role in our future spiritual existence. It's about understanding our accountability for how we live our lives. Knowing all that, digesting all that, and then applying that knowledge in how we exercise our free will. Exercising that free will with consciousness and deliberation, making conscious choices, exerting ourselves and overcoming those obstacles, right? The tendencies and temptations that sometimes challenge us, that hold us back a little bit, or that, just challenge us in our attempts to live the life that we aspire to. But having this understanding and applying that knowledge, and then doing so, but feeling confident that those efforts that we make to live as Jesus taught us, or as our spiritual benefactors in his name, or even other moral teachers show us and encourage us, having the confidence to make those efforts, knowing that it will bring us the peace, the fulfillment, and the inner joy that we're yearning for. We do so relying not only on the logic that is there and that is so important in the Spiritist teachings, but likewise on the empirical evidence that we also turn to as part of the Spiritist science. And this all brings me back to the connection I made that night in our Gospel at Home session regarding the lesson at hand and the preparations that we were making in advance of this coming storm and potential hurricane. Because, for those of us who live in South Florida, we know when hurricane season starts. We know what we need to do to be prepared. But it's like, as long as it's only something that may happen, it's a possibility, but we don't really know for sure. We don't have at the moment a certain degree of confidence that something is going to happen. As long as we stay in that phase, we're kind of putting it off. Those preparations are like something that we will get to, or we just sort of play the waiting game. But somehow, whenever the threat of the hurricane strikes close enough to home, both geographically and in time, now you'll find plenty of us scurrying around trying to do everything that we need to do to get ready. So what happened? We began to feel a sense of urgency. And if we take that back to what Emmanuel's talking about in this situation of preparing things in our home, right? He uses that example. You know that sometimes if we can't keep up with our cleaning every day, maybe this is you, maybe not, some of us surely can relate, we get busy. And sometimes our house is not exactly presentable. But imagine now you've got someone coming over. What are you going to do? You're going to run around trying to do everything to get your house at least presentable for the guest that's coming. And if the longer they're coming or the more important their visit is, the more work you're going to do to get ready. Or maybe, things get to the point that the condition of your home drives you nuts, and all of a sudden cleaning it shoots up on your list of priorities. Either way, again, you start to feel this sense of urgency. Something's driving you to action. So having just gotten done preparing for this hurricane and then landing on this topic, it made me think about how sometimes the preparations that we make are done out of a compelling force that drives us to act relatively quickly, right? To pick up our speed. And this force is related to something that's important to us at that time. We may be driven to avoid a danger, or we may be compelled to seize an opportunity. So the danger of a hurricane is one example, or likewise the unwanted scenario of someone coming to your home when you're not ready for them. But what about an opportunity that you want to try to take advantage of? So imagine there's a particular skill that you've been thinking about that you'd like to have at work, might make you better at your job, but it just doesn't get there, right, to the top of your list. Now imagine your manager comes to you and tells you point blank that they're going to need someone with that exact skill. And if you can learn what it takes, then the position that they're going to open will be yours, right? You will have this promotion as long as you can learn what's needed within a certain time frame. Things change, right? All of a sudden, you're going to want to go out and get that skill. Sometimes this kind of sense of urgency comes up, and it's like it lights a fire under us and sets us into motion. Spiritually speaking, I think that Spiritism, or better, the knowledge that we acquire by studying Spiritism, has the potential to give us this kind of urgency when it comes to our spiritual existence. And it's not by driving us out of a fear, but actually an awareness that we can act on. So in other words, we say that Spiritism is inspiring because it broadens or clarifies our vision of life. And by teaching us about our existence as evolving spiritual beings and all that that entails, it shows us how our present and future existence, so both our short and long term, including beyond this particular lifetime, is impacted by how we act, how we react, how we treat others and ourselves, what we think about and value, etc. And I've said before that it's great that we understand, we spend time thinking about our immortality. But it's also important to take the time to contemplate our physical mortality, right? We need to be prepared for when that time comes, both for ourselves and for our loved ones. We need to digest that before it happens. And we need to think about, if we're going to survive that and continue living, what will life be like beyond here? And eventually, someday, after we've spent time in our true home, that is the spiritual realm, or you could say in our true state, that is the discarnate state, not in the physical body, eventually we will reincarnate again. And what will our new incarnation be like? As we learn through studying Spiritism, and as I've been referring to tonight, that's up to us. And I guess in a way, the urgency that we take from this knowledge is up to us as well, because we have our free will, right? We have our free will to make our own decisions. And if we're kind of good where we're at and where we think that that's going to take us, we feel comfortable with that, then by all means, we're welcome to keep up with the status quo and whatever that brings. But if there are things in our lives that we'd like to be different, we'd like to see improve, if we desire a better future, if we'd like to have less suffering and more joy, either now and or down the road, then let's think about this lesson from Emmanuel tonight. And let's leverage the inspiration and take this advice from him to not simply live out our lives mechanically, including when it comes to the spiritual aspect of our lives. Let's try to be, as he said, sincere disciples, not attempting to change our ideas every day or even to make some kind of drastic changes overnight. That's not what is expected of us. But instead, as Emmanuel says, let's give our thoughts and ideas a new shine, right? Let's polish them on an ongoing basis, right? Let's keep up with that maintenance by sublimating our impulses, renewing our concepts, elevating our desires, and as Emmanuel suggests, continually improving on the laudable qualities that we currently possess. Let's take this knowledge from Spiritism that inspires, and as I've said tonight, lends a bit of urgency to make those worthy preparations for our own well-being. That's it for tonight. I want to thank you all for joining and spending your time with me. Any questions or comments, we'd love to hear from you, either at Kardec Radio or at Explore Spiritism. I wish you and your loved ones a great next couple of weeks, and I'll see you next time. Thank you so much. Have a great night, and God bless.